Hey, everybody. I am Dr. Nelson Moses. I'm from Long Island University, Brooklyn campus, retired a while ago after 35 years of being a professor at that place. And also as I'm a clinician and I continue to be a practicing clinician. My colleague,
Hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly Osam, and I am a practicing clinician as well. And I work across many different settings from rehabilitation hospital setting to home health and also private practice. All right. And welcome, everyone, to our presentation about agency in the evolution of an autistic child, my son, and his clinician, me. And this is a case study of my son. Um, for some disclosures, I do serve on state level committees here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I just like to disclose the ones that I'm currently serving on that you see on the screen, and then also some past service to the community. So, how did I get here? Well, I was torn, literally. My son received a diagnosis of autism, and we were specifically guided down one road. His behaviors needed to be controlled, is what we were told, and we needed to seek ways to do that. We were sent to many different experts. Things were literally spiraling out of control for my son, and the writing was on the wall that we needed a way to help him. We saw his least restrictive environment change, and it was getting more and more restrictive. We had done a public day, public separate, homebound, a hospital program, which we tried to get set up when he was in the hospital, and private separate. What that means is that for his behaviors for the 2016-2017 school year in the public separate setting, there were 2,058 recorded behaviors that he had in the classroom. Of those behaviors, you can see here just a snapshot of some of them on the board. Anything from running from the staff to disrobing, climbing on furniture, attacking staff, scratching, throwing, biting. And just to give you all an example of how severe these behaviors were, he was able to draw blood and had to go to infectious disease to be screened. That is how severe some of these attacks were. They were labeled as maladaptive, self-injurious, some of them destructive and defiant. If we look at this chart here, which I put together from an original spreadsheet that I, as a parent, made trying to just get a grasp on what to do, you can see that the main behavior that he had that went into the thousands was spitting, and then followed by scratching, grabbing, biting, throwing, crying, hitting staff. And if we kind of look at it from this standpoint, we can see that when he started the school year, um, his baseline was nowhere near where he ended. The escalations became more and more severe. I put this up just to show you all that this is the actual spreadsheet that I personally put together from the data point sheets that came home from the school. And it was my desperate attempt as a layman parent to try and figure out, how is this getting worse? He was then transitioned out of the public separate setting to a private day. And they unfortunately inherited a lot of the behaviors, as you can see here. So we were looking at in the home, we had an extinction model where we had outside companies coming in to try and help us. And they instructed us to do things like give him tactile cues, redirect him, ignore him, withhold his preferred items, have him to clean up things that he might knock down, or when he would spit, requiring him to look at us, have eye gaze, requiring quiet hands, safe hands, having a calm body, sitting down, basically get him to comply. Those things did not work, and the escalations continued. So back to the wall, and our backs were to the wall, literally. Not only was the writing on the wall, our backs were to the wall. We needed a different answer. We had tried behavior. We knew it was important that we get his behaviors under control, but the methods that were being used up to this point were only serving to escalate the behaviors. So, what was the other answer? Then the answer came when I was researching for one of my son's IEP meetings, and I stumbled upon something that quite specifically said that communication is a human right, and that's internationally recognized through the United Nations Human Rights Convention. What does that say? Well, everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference. Two, which really stood out to me when I was preparing for this IEP meeting, was everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing, or in print, in the form of art, or through any other media of his choice. Why couldn't my son have a media of his choice to let us know what he was trying to let us know through his behaviors? Was his behavior communication, was the question. Yes, but it was lost in the translation. What he was trying to let us know through his hitting, his kicking, his spitting, his biting, we weren't receiving that message. So, my son, the person of interest, is translation of my son's behaviors possible? Could providing him with modalities decrease his behaviors? And I mean modalities to express himself. Well, in my mind, of course. And that's what we had not been doing in the model where we were trying to extinguish the behaviors. We hadn't been giving him a modality to let us know what he was trying to communicate. So, quite unintentionally, I was asking a PICO question when I looked at it in retrospect. So, layman Kim was looking at P, the person being my son, the behaviors, the modalities to communicate, and then, of course, that could work. Now, as an SLP, I realized that P is the population, an autistic male child. I, the intervention, the multimodal communication. The comparison would be the behaviors after focusing on increasing his communication instead of trying to extinguish them. And then the outcome, increased expressive communication and decreased behaviors. So here we go. The problem, as I was told in so many IEP meetings, my son, what did we do from there? The intervention came in the form of an communication device by the Prinky Ramage company. And as you can see, and I want to point this out in the picture, his home screen, there's nothing hidden from him. When we originally were set up on the device, it was masked. And so there were only certain targets available to him. And by the time we left that meeting where we were given the device and I drove to my mom's house with so many questions about how am I going to use this thing? I don't understand it. He had unmasked the device somehow, and I didn't know how he did it. And so I thought, let's see. Let's use a constructivist point of view on this. Let's let him try to use it and see what he does. And I used myself as an example. I have an iPhone to this day, do not know how to use more than half of the things on it. When they handed it to me at the store, they didn't mask it. They had enough faith in me. They presumed enough competence in me that eventually I'm going to be able to figure this thing out. So I gave my son that benefit of the doubt. We also tried writing. That one was not as functional for him because he had difficulty with his grasp and it wasn't allowing him to be able to express himself well. We also tried typing and keyboarding, which he is still having success with, but that is still improving over time. It's still an emerging skill for him. We also tried having him point to letters on a board to spell, and he also had some success with that, but it was not as efficient for him as touching on the screen of his communication device. He also used an approximation of an American Sign Language sign for please. And what we did was we would present him with partner assisted scanning arrays of either auditory or visual things to choose from. And then he would do his approximation of the sign please when he was selecting one. And he still does that to this day. And he can do that across settings. We also accepted eye gaze as another modality of communication from him, meaning that if he looked directly at us, looked directly at an object, and looked back toward us, we would then present him with a partner assisted scanning choice of, is this what you're wanting? And then he would sign back to us using his approximated sign. Gesturing also, our son was not easily able to point due to difficulties with motor movements, motor planning, motor initiation, motor sequencing. And so the closest he could do is kind of push his hand this way towards something. But we also accepted that and then would go back and present him with an array of choices to make sure that that is what he was trying to select. Again, back to the road. So went down the behavior road. All of the folks who tried to assist us on that road, most of whom had discharged us, were no longer present to help us. So I was in search of a Moses, so to speak, to help lead me down to what would be this new road for my son using multimodal communication. And I landed in a classroom in NYU with a professor by the name of Dr. Nelson Moses, who not only understood what I was trying to implement with my son, but had been doing it for many, many years, and introduced me to a term that actually was the summation of what I was seeing in my son and what I was trying to convince those around me was present in my son. And that was languaging, using the augmentative and alternative communication supports to demonstrate that. But what is it? And I'll turn it over to Dr. Moses.
We're using the term languaging to refer to the term commonly referred to, the process commonly referred to as language. We're calling it language, influenced by Henner and Robinson and some of our own work. We see language as languaging and languaging as coding and expressing to self and others in real time ideas, intents, and emotions as they pass through our mind. It's exact languaging is what I'm doing right now as I speak. I'm having ideas. I intend to express them to you, and they come right out of my mouth in some miraculous way as I continue to have ideas, etc., etc., etc. Language is typically thought of as in a nounish kind of way, where people speak of language, think of language, I think, as an object or system of objects like words, prefixes, suffixes, transcribed in grammar books, acquired from others, committed to memory, and retrieved when they have something to say or interpret. That nounish, other-focused way of looking at language is not languaging as we see it. Language should be a verb, to language, and its gerund form, languaging. Language is alive. To language is to be alive. Languaging is what children do as they play and speak about objects they are manipulating, or create stories as they pretend. Languaging, why am I having trouble saying that? Languaging is about what you and I are doing as we talk to ourselves or to a friend or associate. By the way, speaking to ourselves is the most frequent use of languaging. We all have a stream of things going on in our head, and sometimes we choose to express what is going on up there to others. The function of languaging is to code and express to oneself and others Again, ideas, intents, and emotions passing through our mind in real time, i.e., to express and code and express, represent and express our stream of consciousness. Languaging, therefore, is a biologic process. It is a human right to express oneself. And everyone, speaking or non-speaking, child or adult, one way or another languages. Again, I'm languaging out of my mouth. I am speaking, but that is not necessarily the way that one has to do it. And people do it. People sign. People use augmentative or technological devices. People sing. That's out of one's mouth. People create art. People dance. People have ways of all kinds of ways of languaging. It is our job as SLCs to understand the languaging of our clients and to facilitate that expression. I'm going to kick this back to Kimberly, who will expand on all of this.
Dr. Moses, and well said. That brings us to, well, how do we identify languaging? I was trying to convince everyone around my son that he was doing this, but how would they identify it? Well, we need to start with observation, don't we? But we don't need to end there. And that was the difficulty. When we were doing the behavior model, it wasn't so much that we did not need that portion. Of course, we needed it. He was doing things that could hurt others, that could hurt himself. But that was just what we could observe. What we needed to do was take those behaviors that we were seeing and try to figure out, well, what's the catalyst for those? Because that goes beyond what we were able to see. I look at it as sign versus symptom. I consider a sign as what I can see. What can I see my son doing? He's kicking, he's hitting, he's headbanging. I can see that. Symptom, and this is the majority of what is driving that behavior, I consider that things that I could not readily see. And so I said I needed to consider that what I can observe is only a glimpse. And that's the key, that I can't directly observe what's going on inside of my son. And I had to consider that the unobservable things that are driving the behaviors that we're actually seeing, that if I were just to simply label those things without trying to access somehow from the individual experiencing them, what was driving them, I was just missing too much information. For me to simply sit on the outside and say that, say, his spitting, for example, was maladaptive, I didn't know enough about why he was doing it to just place that label just from my simple external observation. I feel like by doing that, it really kept me humble. It kept me humble enough to seek something other than compliance, because that's not ultimately what I wanted. What I wanted from my son was cooperation. I wanted to understand what he was trying to tell me, and I knew that languaging was the way to figure that out if I could get this multimodal communication idea off of the ground independently by myself, because again, we had been discharged from pretty much everywhere. So sign versus symptom, some quick examples. Observed, my son was observed throwing food in the trash, specifically hamburgers, not even trying them. That was what I was able to observe. But when I was able to do some partner assisted scanning with him and figure out what was really happening, he was actually in the process of turning them over to throw them in the trash. He was looking at the backside and seeing the hash marks on them. If they had hash marks, he knew I had made them in the air fryer, and he didn't want that. So he would throw them in the trash. Why is that important? Because me just making an assumption that he was doing a maladaptive behavior just based on him throwing those away, it was not the case. It was just he wanted them prepared in a different way. And I had not given him a modality to express that. When I gave him a hamburger that was made in the skillet and he could flip it over and there was no hash marks on the back, he was fine. him standing up. It wasn't an attempt to elope. It wasn't defiance. When I was able to do partner assisted scanning with him or have him use his AAC device, he was able to let me know that he needed that movement at that time. The spitting, and this one is huge because we were trying to extinguish this under the direction of those who were working with my son to make him clean it up every time, clean it up every time, thousands upon thousands of spits. And we actually eventually came to find out that it was because of a swallowing disorder, as to why he was not able to control his saliva. And similar with the other things that you see on the screen, all of these were attempts at regulation, attempts at him trying to do something to help his body to participate in what we were asking him to participate in. I was then asked when I went pretty much contrary to all of the folks who tried to help us and then discharge us, is this a hill I'm willing to die on? And I said, yes. Why, though, for these things would I be willing to do that? Especially the spitting, it's because of things like hot chocolate. How is that related? Because my son started consistently asking for hot chocolate when the spitting would escalate. And we came to find out on top of that, that he would perseverate, as we were told, on his device, hitting the word tired, tired, tired over and over again. He's asking for hot chocolate. He's saying he's tired and he's spitting hundreds of times a day. When we actually went beyond what we could see and had some blood work run, as you can see, there was a reason why he was tired, as you can see from the numbers on the screen. So had we just stopped at the behavior, had we just stopped there, we would not have known that there was an underlying symptom, the tiredness that he was feeling, that we ourselves could not see. Another quick example of that is another perseveration, as we were told that my son had, where he would hit A on his device hundreds of times a day. And the thought was that it needed to be hidden from him or locked out. We were able to then find out that when mom talks, what mom was saying to get people's attention was, hey, come here. Hey, come here. And so what was he doing? He was doing exactly what his mom was modeling. It wasn't a perseveration. It was functional. He was trying to call people to get their attention. And so he was like, if mom calls you by A to get your attention, I'm going to do the same thing. Well, why is all this important? It's important because when we look back at the spitting, when we look back at the fact that we eventually found out that his secretions were pooling due to him not initiating a swallow, by him not having enough strength to even try and make himself swallow in certain times, and also by his throat being extremely sore sometimes from strep. All these things we couldn't see, and we needed instrumentation to test. When we were just writing them off, no wonder he was continuing to escalate, because us ignoring his spitting is not going to cure his strep throat. Us taking his preferred items away from him is not going to stop his dysphagia. What we ended up finding out when we didn't just look at the behavior, but we went deeper, we found out that he did have strep throat several times, and he did have clinically diagnosed dysphagia. And so if we go back and look at these charts here, and I just want to point out, I added an arrow here where you can see that that was a strep diagnosis that he had, one of many. So finally, we had more words than we had behaviors. And just to show you all some quick snapshots, this is data from my son's communication device. And what we're able to see with that, not only the times of day that he uses it, but also the different words that he does use. In these pictograms, what you can see, the larger the word is, the more that he used it during that span of time that you run the report on. And just so it's clear that this is not an argument against looking at behaviors, I want you guys to look at two things, the name Skylar here and the name Kyle here. These were actually two of his RBTs who were in home with us before we were discharged. And these were two of them who really embraced the multimodal communication. And so he was still actively requesting them. And quick note aside, he was also requesting mom. And the reason I bring that up is because how much more powerful and empowering would it have been to me as a caregiver to see? Of course, I needed to know about the behaviors, but to see something like this alongside of it. Because if we had had this when we had that, um, we would have likely had less behaviors because that's what we ended up seeing was a decrease. And things like this chart here, where you see the different parts of speech that he was using, nouns, verbs, adjectives, pronouns, prepositions, determiners, adverbs, interjections, questions, just wonderful things for a parent to see. And even just by word group, some of those same things I just mentioned, you can see the actual words that he was using, just the language rich vocabulary that he had in his head, that he was up to that point languaging through his behaviors. And now we're able to see a snapshot of them, not all, but the ones that he expressed. And here I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of words, afraid and scared. Um, how much more effective would it have been if he would have had a modality to express these two things back when we saw the uptick in behaviors? When he started out at that pretty much nice flat baseline at the beginning of the school year to that escalation at the end, for him to let us know that he was afraid, that he was scared. But even within that, he was able to express hope. And that's a great word for our vision of his tomorrow. I'd like to also point out here that even though he had so many problems at school, after we were able to give him an effective modality to communicate, and actually several effective ones, he was requesting bus to be able to get to school. And these are just some more snapshots of more words that he was able to use. And let's go back to this one, because again, as we talked about, the larger the word is, the more that he used it. And you can see here in this time frame, January 2018 to 2019, how large the word afraid is, how large the word mad is, how large the word sick is, how large the word sad is. And we all know that as we looked at in previous slides, he had several different occasions of strep throughout this time, and also the dysphagia and difficulty swallowing. All right. And let's go through just a couple of more so you guys can see more examples of just the language that was there. It was already there. It wasn't that we educated this, so to say. We showed him how to use the device. And this one I would like to point out, if we look at our transition from an extinguishment-based protocol over to positive behavior. And we look at this was actually one of the graphs that his school provides, and it shows things that he does that are positive, like being ready, accepting responsibility, respect for self and others. So again, I just want to drive home the absolute need that what we observe as maladaptive, so to say, behaviors really do need to be investigated further. This is a current chart that I was happy to receive from his school, just to show you guys where he kind of is present day. And as you can see on this serious incidents or behaviors chart, everything is zeroed out. All behaviors are archived. So that means we came from the 2058 recorded behavior incidents per school year to non-recordable. Do we ignore the so-called problem behaviors? We don't ignore them. As you can see here, 68 problem behaviors, but what they do is they map them against the positive behaviors. So how much more, again, empowering is it to a parent, to a child, to see that I had 203 positive behaviors, even if I did have some difficulties. When I started seeing this, I started to see that the communication really made the difference. So when we finally connected the dots on his behavioral chart, we know that now that road less traveled is actually communication. Well, now that we have the communication, let's talk about some cultural considerations. And I just wanted to make a few points here that I come from a community that's traditionally underserved. And we had to, what they called in those days, make do without services. And what did that mean? That meant that just like I showed you in the slides, where as a layman, I posed that PICO question, not knowing that's what I was doing. Many underserved communities, that's what they have to do. They have these things that occur, and they have to have some mechanism for dealing with those, some mechanism for problem resolution without professional support, which is what I saw most of my life. And it might be a bare bones system that they're using, but it's something that's functional to them that allows them to navigate the world with whatever difficulties they are having. What might be perceived as defiance might be that coping system that that underserved community has been using. And I'll give you some quick examples. On here on the slide, you see where it says big boys don't eat with their hands. That was something that an in-home therapist actually said to my son one day when he was eating with his hands. But my husband is from Ghana, West Africa. And if you know anything about that culture, you can even go to a Ghanaian restaurant here in the US. They will bring out a huge bowl of fresh water to your table before they serve you. What is that for? It's because you wash your hands in that bowl prior to eating your meal, because certain meals they eat with their hands, even soups. So for someone who is not from that culture, in their culture, it might be that big boys don't eat with their hands. They use utensils. But if you take a step back and consider the culture, it may very well be that big boys do eat with their hands. And that was something that my son saw almost daily. My husband, his friends, his family, when they would come over, sometimes that is what he would see. And also remember, your experience may not be theirs, so treat accordingly. Make sure that your non-speaking patients feel seen and feel heard, no matter the communication modality. Pretty much, they're asking us, can you hear me now? And I hope that after this presentation, we're able to tell them yes. And I would like to show you all a quick snippet of my son doing something that I was basically told that he would never do. IEP after IEP, he had goals for sound production. He never could meet them, to the point where they removed them from his IEP because he was never able to show progress towards them. And he could not even demonstrate to them that he could repeat, let alone do volitional sounds that they were asking him to do. But when my son was diagnosed, and when I figured out that he needed more than just something to extinguish his behaviors, I looked at my son and I said, son, we hear you. I was trying to let him know, we as parents, we hear you, even though you're not using the spoken word. And so I would like for you guys to watch this video. It's my son eating one of his favorite things. And I'm going to model to him, we hear you. And then he is going to speak back, something I thought I would never hear. We hear you. We hear you.
He hear you. He hear you.
We hear you. All right. And so with that, I just want to leave you with, please presume confidence. As you can see, my son was the most likely candidate to be put in the most restrictive educational setting from the way that his behaviors were going. there was absolutely no reason that anyone would have said this is a child to presume competence in. But yet, when it was done, look at all the language that we were able to demonstrate. Look at how the behaviors came down to 0 serious behaviors reported. I believe that we can all use this. And I know many of you already do. And I just want to encourage you, if you're already doing that, to continue, because even the most severe, seemingly severe child has languaging. My son was just one, but I belong to a faith where the leader of that faith would leave the 99 to look for the one. And without the one being included, with that 99, you can't get to 100. And when we get to 100, we get to our centennial. So happy centennial, Asha. Everybody, we thank you.